In the heart of a serene little village where the scent of wet earth mingled with birdsong, lived Eulalia. Her days were woven from simplicity and the radiance of an unshakable faith, a pillar that had sustained her since earliest childhood. Her eyes, a deep brown, reflected the purity of her soul, and her smile, though rare, could warm even the most hardened hearts. There was no shadow of doubt in her spirit, only the certainty of a greater purpose, guided by the teachings she had embraced with fervor. Yet the peace that wrapped the village was fragile, an illusion soon to be undone by the implacable hand of the Roman Empire. Dark rumors, at first whispered, began to echo more loudly, carrying with them the growing threat of persecution against Christians. Fear, thick and sticky as a dense mist, crept through the alleyways, suffocating hope and planting seeds of discord. Entire families were forced to renounce their faith, bowing to pagan gods under pain of torture and death. But Eulalia, with a serenity bordering on stubbornness, refused to yield. Her faith was not a choice. It was the essence of who she was, and to renounce it would be to renounce herself. The looming shadow became reality in the figure of the praetor Daciano. His arrival in the village was a spectacle of ostentation and cruelty, the dust raised by his retinue covering the place's innocence. Daciano was known for his impiety, a man whose mere presence inspired terror. His eyes, icy and calculating, seemed to search souls, looking for any hint of dissent. The atmosphere grew heavy, every breath laden with dread, as the villagers hid in their homes, watching the darkness descend upon them. Eulalia, however, did not hide. An inner strength drove her, a conviction so deep it overcame any fear. She emerged from the silent crowd, her slender, determined figure contrasting with the praetor's imposing presence. With a clear, steady voice that rang out in the stunned hush, she confronted Daciano publicly. "I am a Christian," she declared, the words heavy with unbreakable truth. "And your tyranny will not extinguish the light of our faith." She condemned injustice, cruelty, and idolatry, her words a direct challenge to Roman authority. Daciano's fury was immediate and visceral. His eyes, once calculating, now burned with rage. No one dared defy him like that. The affront was personal, a stain on his reputation as an implacable tyrant. With a brusque gesture, he ordered Eulalia's arrest. The guards, accustomed to blind obedience, moved forward, yet there was hesitation in their steps, a startled disbelief at the courage of that young woman. The imprisonment was only the prelude. The tortures would begin soon, meant to break not only her body, but her spirit. The community's silent cry followed Eulalia as she was dragged away. Brutal tortures began, devised to dissolve her faith, to force her to deny everything she believed. Instruments of pain were applied mercilessly, each blow an attempt to silence her resistance. Yet amid excruciating agony, Eulalia did not yield. Her voice, though faint, continued to murmur prayers, her eyes fixed on a vision that transcended physical suffering. The community watched, powerless, torn between paralyzing fear and a secret admiration for the young woman's resilience. Even the most hardened guards, used to scenes of cruelty, were shaken. A strange light seemed to emanate from Eulalia, not a physical light, but a brightness of spirit that refused to be extinguished, a revelation of the strength faith could grant even in the darkest moments. Her endurance was a mirror, reflecting the fragility of tyranny itself. News of Eulalia's unwavering courage, the young woman who defied Daciano's tyranny and endured unspeakable tortures without renouncing her faith, spread like an uncontrollable wildfire. From mouth to mouth, from village to village, the story ran, inspiring hope in the hearts of oppressed Christians and igniting a flame of silent revolt among the people. She was no longer merely Eulalia. She had become a symbol, a beacon of resistance amid the darkness of Roman persecution. The guards' secret admiration turned into murmurs in taverns and squares, calling into question the legitimacy of Daciano's cruelty. For the praetor, Eulalia's persistence was more than a personal challenge. It was a growing political problem. His authority, once unquestioned, was now being challenged by the obstinacy of a girl. Each day, Eulalia resisted. Daciano's reputation as an efficient, implacable ruler was eroded. The people began to see him not as a strong leader, but as a tyrant, unable to break the will of a single woman. Frustrated and humiliated, he knew he needed a new strategy, something that could crush Eulalia's spirit once and for all, without turning her into an even greater martyr. In an act of false benevolence, Daciano summoned Eulalia, not for more torture, but for a conversation. He offered her a chance at redemption, an opportunity to live, to return to her quiet life, provided that she publicly renounced her faith and offered sacrifices to the Roman gods. The proposal was seductive, a glimpse of freedom in the midst of the prison's horror. But Eulalia knew the moral cost was far too high. To renounce her faith would be to renounce herself, everything she represented. Her eyes, though weary, held the same determination as before, and she refused the offer, reaffirming her loyalty to Christ. Enraged by her refusal, Daciano watched his final attempt to save face collapse. In the icy solitude of her cell, Eulalia found strength in prayer. Isolated from the outside world, her body torn and her mind exhausted, she clung to sacred words and to the memory of her faith's teachings. With each Hail Mary, with each psalm recited, a strange peace enveloped her, a certainty that she was not alone. Her faith was not merely a shield, but an inexhaustible source of resilience, an invisible bond with something greater than her suffering. Suddenly, the cell door creaked, and a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. It was Lucio, an old childhood friend, now a Roman soldier, his face marked by anguish. Coerced by fear and by loyalty to Daciano, he tried to persuade Eulalia to give up, to accept the praetor's offer. "Please, Eulalia," he whispered, his voice breaking, "there is no hope left. Save yourself. Think of your family, your life." Eulalia's heart tightened at the unexpected betrayal. The inner conflict between compassion for her friend and the firmness of her conviction was painful. She looked at him with sorrow, but her answer was an eloquent silence, a refusal that broke Lucio's heart and strengthened her own resolve even more. Even in her extreme suffering, small symbols of hope appeared. A guard, moved by her resilience, left a little more water in her bowl, a secret act of kindness amid cruelty. A ray of sunlight slipping through the cell's bars, illuminating a small image of Christ she had kept, was a reminder that light would always find a way. They were small signs, brief moments of comfort that fed and strengthened her. Daciano, his patience exhausted and his reputation in tatters, decided that small gestures of torture were no longer enough. Eulalia's persistence had to be crushed definitively and publicly. He ordered even harsher torments, aiming for a spectacular execution, a public martyrdom that would serve as an example and silence any remaining trace of resistance or hope the young martyr might have kindled in the people's hearts. A date was set, and the news spread like a dark omen. Eulalia would die, and her death would be a spectacle of Roman cruelty. Yet Dacian scarcely knew that, rather than silencing her, he was about to immortalize her name. The final day arrived, a gray dawn that seemed to weep with the village. The streets, usually bustling, were now packed with a silent, tense crowd, all gathered to witness Eulalia's martyrdom. The air was heavy, charged with a mixture of fear, sorrow, and a strange expectancy. No one dared speak loudly, only whispers and anxious glances passed among those present, while Roman soldiers kept rigid watch, ready to suppress any sign of uprising. The scaffold, raised in the center of the square, looked like a profane altar awaiting its sacrifice. When Eulalia was dragged into the square, the crowd's eyes turned toward her. Her body bore marks, but her eyes shone with an unshakable inner light. Even at the edge of death, she lifted her head with dignity. In a final defiance, with a voice weak yet filled with supernatural strength, Eulalia delivered her last statement. She reaffirmed her faith in Christ, not as an act of rebellion, but as a declaration of love and conviction. With a serene smile, she asked forgiveness for her executioners, for Dacian, and for all who had tormented her, showing a compassion that rose above pain and injustice. Her words echoed through the square, touching hearts in a way Roman cruelty never could. The climax was terrible and sublime. As the executioners prepared for the final act, a strong, sudden wind swept the square, snuffing out the torches and making the Roman standards whip violently. A sharp cry from one of the executioners rang out, and a bolt of lightning from a sky that had been clear until then struck the scaffold, setting it ablaze instantly. Amid the chaos and the fire, a white dove, immaculately white, rose from Eulalia's body toward the heavens and vanished into the clouds. The crowd murmured. Some knelt, others wept. It was not a miracle, but a sign, a confirmation that her soul had been carried to a place of peace and that her faith had been affirmed by heaven. Eulalia's death did not produce the fear Dacian expected. Instead, a surging wave of grief and inspiration swept the crowd. People did not flee, they remained, their eyes fixed on the place where the young martyr had fallen. Her image, no longer that of a tortured prisoner, but of a victorious saint, solidified in everyone's mind. Whispers became low chants, tears became silent vows of resistance. The seed of Eulalia's faith had been planted in the people's hearts, and it began to sprout. Dacian's cruelty, exposed by Eulalia's unwavering resistance and by the supernatural events that accompanied her death, began to undermine his authority and reputation. Reports of what happened in the square spread quickly, and the praetor's image, once feared, was now regarded with contempt and suspicion. His soldiers, once loyal, began to question his methods, and the population, once submissive, openly showed its aversion. Dacian's fall was not immediate, but the seed of his disgrace was planted that day, corroding his position until he was finally deposed and forgotten. A grim reminder of the futility of tyranny against faith. Eulalia's story, told and retold, became a symbol of resistance and faith. Future generations heard of the young woman who defied an empire, the woman who chose death rather than the renunciation of her principles. Her memory inspired the founding of secret Christian communities, sanctuaries raised in her honor, and she was venerated as a martyr and a saint. Her faith, even in death, triumphed over tyranny. Her memory lived on as a beacon of hope and courage, lighting the way for all who seek truth and justice, an eternal testimony to the power of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The legacy of Saint Eulalia endured, an inextinguishable flame that continued to burn in the hearts of millions